So, James Harden finally won his MVP. Now we can officially say that the Oklahoma City Thunder drafted 3 future MVPs in 3 straight drafts. Had a chance to keep all of them, and yet it didn't work out. Over the years, I've seen a lot of people criticize the Harden trade as one of the worst trades in history for the Thunder. And that makes sense. Harden wanted 4 years $60 million, but the Thunder offered him 4 years $54 million and refused to budge. Why would they not pay him the extra $6 million to keep the dynasty together? That's pretty stupid of them. But it was a lot more complicated than that, and I'll explain that and a couple other reasons why the Harden trade made sense from the Thunder's point of view. How's it going, ladies and gents? My name's Andy, and today we're gonna take a look at the real reasons why the Oklahoma City Thunder pulled the trigger on the James Harden trade. Let's continue talking about that contract. So, there's a penalty in the NBA called the repeater tax, which was implemented during the 2011 lockout. But it did not activate until 2 seasons later in the 2013-14 season, where most of the damage would have been done to OKC. The repeater tax is basically an additional penalty. If a team is over the salary cap for consecutive seasons, then they have to pay an even higher luxury tax. So let's take a look at OKC's salary situation back then. In 2011-12, Harden's last season with OKC, the team had a payroll of roughly $62 million, which was $4 million above the salary cap. I want to point out that this was before Russell Westbrook's 5-year, $80 million extension kicked in, yet they were already over the cap. In the following season, they got rid of some bad contracts, and the cap was still $58 million, yet the Thunder's payroll was now $68 million without Harden. That's because they took on Kevin Martin's contract, which is fine. Now, the next season, 2013-14, was when OKC would have faced a tremendous tax if they kept Harden. Even without him, their payroll was already $71 million, which was $12 million higher than the cap. If you add on Harden's extra $15 million per year, that pushes their payroll to $86 million. Okay, so obviously it wouldn't be that high, cause hypothetically if they did keep Harden, they wouldn't have gotten some of these other players. But even if we assume they're about $20 million above the cap, the repeater tax kicks in and penalizes them, charging them $3.75 per every $1 that they're above the cap. Basically, OKC was looking at a luxury tax of about $80 million, and that's in addition to their normal payroll. And this would also continue for the next 2 years after that, cause Harden's contract would have been for 4 years. Despite OKC's insane popularity and supportive fan base, it's still a small market team and they can't afford to risk that much money. Even if Harden accepted the initial 4-year, $54 million offer, OKC would still face this insane repeater tax, although it would be a bit less. It's unlikely that they could afford to keep the core together anyway, and somebody would have been traded down the road regardless. The second reason was Harden's questionable fit on the team. So in the 2012 offseason, the Thunder had 2 major contract decisions to make. Harden obviously was one of them. The second one was Serge Ibaka. Back then, Ibaka was a super athletic defender with a solid jump shot and looked like the perfect complementary player for Westbrook and Durant. He just led the league in blocks with 3.7 per game and also finished second in voting for Defensive Player of the Year. Back then, he was a great rebounder too, averaging close to 3 offensive boards per game. The organization believed that Ibaka should be the first priority, so in the middle of August, they signed him to a 4-year, $48 million deal, which was very good. It was a great contract for the team. In hindsight, they should have prioritized Harden instead, but back then, most agreed with their decision to sign Ibaka. He was a great fit for the team. Now, you might be thinking, well, the Ibaka contract was great, but what about the Kendrick Perkins contract? In the previous year, Perkins signed a 4-year, $36 million contract with OKC, and a lot of people point to his contract as the reason why they could not keep Harden. Now, that is true. Obviously, Perkins regressed really quickly, and every time his name is brought up nowadays, he's kind of a joke. But at the time of the signing, Perkins was a good player, believe it or not. A mean, tough big man inside the paint who's not afraid to get physical. He used to be a great defender as well. He was also a mentor for the young guys and provided a steady leadership that they were missing. So I can see why the Thunder gave him that contract. Basically, around that time, OKC prioritized having two solid big men to complement Russ and KD, over a scoring guard off the bench, whose skill set kinda overlaps with the other two. Years later, it looks pretty bad, but it sorta made sense if you look at it from their perspective, and how they wanted to build their team. Plus, in the season after they lost James Harden, the Thunder went 60-22, a higher winning percentage than any season with him. If it wasn't for Westbrook's injury during the playoffs, they had a great chance to win the title that year. The third reason is that, well, the trade package they got back for Harden was pretty damn good. Kevin Martin was a 20 points per game scorer in Houston, and honestly, his playstyle was a better fit. He was a really good scorer, a great three-point shooter, but also played off the ball very well, as opposed to Harden, who was more of a ball-dominant one-on-one player. And they already had Russ and KD doing that. They also got the 12th pick of the draft, Jeremy Lamb, who unfortunately didn't get many opportunities in OKC. The main problem though was that they lost Kevin Martin after just one season because they didn't have his bird rights. They wanted to keep him and he wanted to be there, but they did not have enough cap space to offer him a good contract, which really sucked. I think losing Martin was very underrated. He was a really good fit on that team. Additionally, they also got two more picks in return, which turned out to be Steven Adams and Andre Robertson, two players who've had a large impact in OKC. If you put it all together, it's actually a great package they got back for Harden. Those were the three main reasons, but there's another thing I want to talk about. Recently, I've heard a lot of people say that they should have traded away Westbrook instead of Harden back in 2012. Cause you know, with all that stuff about Westbrook not passing the ball to Durant, Westbrook shooting too much, Westbrook just being Westbrook, maybe Harden and Durant would have been the better duo. But remember, they made the trade a few months after the 2012 finals, where Harden had probably the worst series of his career. Westbrook, on the other hand, played really well, for the most part. He even scored 43 points in Game 4 on 20 of 32 from the field. Afterwards, OKC had a lot more faith in Westbrook than they did for Harden, and that sounds perfectly reasonable to me. I don't think anyone, or at least very few people, would have taken Harden over Westbrook in 2012. Anyway, that basically sums it up. Those were the reasons why OKC really made the James Harden trade. Over time, a lot of stuff gets lost in history, and it's easy to say that they made a huge mistake and should have kept him. Which is true, but we gotta look at trades from other perspectives. That's how it always is in the NBA and with other sports. Some trades look terrible when it happens, but down the road, it could change too. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.